You thought a man like me would settle for a secretary like you, Zuri? In NYC, a black secretary, secretly an heiress, believed she found love with a CEO. But everything shattered outside Tiffany & Co. when he emerged with another woman, her finger gleaming with a diamond ring that mocked her dreams. He kissed her forehead tenderly, a gesture that pierced the secretary's heart, exposing his betrayal. She endured secrecy, vague excuses, and a life kept in the shadows, treated as if she were less than she deserved to be. This is a story of heartbreak, deception, and a fight for self-worth that rises from the ashes of betrayal. Will she reclaim her power? Stick with us to find out. Hit that subscribe button for our latest videos and drop a comment sharing where you're watching from. Curious how far her journey goes? Stay tuned. This tale of resilience will keep you hooked. The late afternoon sun dipped low over New York City, casting a golden haze across Fifth Avenue. Zuri Jackson sat in the plush leather seat of a sleek black Bentley, her heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and nervous excitement. The city buzzed outside, honking taxis, chattering pedestrians, the pulse of urban life. But inside the car, the world felt suspended, quiet, almost sacred. She adjusted her silk scarf, a gift from Ethan, its soft texture a reminder of the whirlwind romance that had swept her off her feet. Her reflection in the tinted window showed a woman transformed, no longer just the diligent secretary who blended into the background of corporate meetings. At 25, Zuri, a black woman with a sharp mind and a guarded heart, had dared to believe she was living a fairy tale. But fairy tales, she would soon learn, were fragile things. Her gaze drifted to the storefront of Tiffany & Co., its iconic blue awning gleaming under the city's glow. Ethan Blackwood, the charismatic CEO who had captivated her for months, had stepped inside moments ago, his parting words still lingering in her ears. "I need to handle something quick in there, darling. Business stuff. Wait here, I'll be right back." His voice, smooth as velvet, had carried that effortless charm she'd grown to adore. She hadn't questioned him. Not then. Not when his smile could unravel her defenses, when his touch made her feel like the only woman in the world. Instead, she'd nodded, her lips curving into a trusting smile. "Of course," she'd said, settling back into the seat, her mind already spinning with possibilities. What was he doing in there? Zuri's imagination ran wild, painting vivid scenes of romance. Maybe he was picking out a surprise, a necklace, a bracelet, or, dare she dream, a ring. Her heart skipped at the thought, a vision flashing before her. Ethan on one knee, the little blue box in his hand, the city fading into a blur as he asked her to be his forever. She blushed at the audacity of her thoughts, but the idea felt so real, so close. After all, the past 6 months had been nothing short of magical. Ethan had waltzed into her life at a corporate event, his presence commanding the room, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You make this look effortless," he'd said, and from that moment, she was his. The minutes ticked by, 5, 10, 15. Zuri glanced at her watch, a delicate silver piece Ethan had gifted her during a weekend getaway in the Hamptons. She traced its face with her fingertip, the memory of that trip warming her. The ocean breeze, the candlelit dinners, the way he'd whispered her name like it was a secret only he could keep. But now sitting in the car, a faint unease crept in, like a shadow slipping across the sun. Why was it taking so long? She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the street outside. Couples strolled hand in hand, their laughter mingling with the city's hum. A woman paused at Tiffany's window, admiring a sparkling display, and Zuri smiled, imagining herself in her place, Ethan by her side. She shifted in her seat, the leather creaking softly. The car smelled of his cologne, sandalwood and cedar, a scent that had become as familiar as her heartbeat. She glanced at the dashboard, where her phone lay, face up, a photo of them together glowing on the screen. It was a candid shot from a rooftop dinner, her laughing as he whispered something in her ear. He'd refused to let her post it online, citing his private nature, and she'd accepted it, charmed by his desire to keep their world sacred. Now, though, the memory of his insistence nagged at her, a tiny splinter in her mind. She shook her head, dismissing it. He was just cautious, protective. That's what she'd told herself every time he dodged her questions about his home, his friends, his life beyond their stolen moments. 20 minutes. The wait stretched on, and Zuri's anticipation began to curdle into something heavier. She leaned forward, peering through the window at the store's entrance. The glass doors reflected the bustling street, but she couldn't see inside. Her fingers drummed against her knee, a nervous rhythm. What kind of business could he have at Tiffany's? Her mind conjured explanations. A gift for his mother, a deal with a client, a surprise for her. She clung to the last one, her heart stubborn in its hope. She imagined him walking out with that boyish grin, a small blue box tucked in his pocket, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. The thought made her smile, but it was a fragile thing, trembling at the edges. Then the doors of Tiffany & Co. swung open, and the world stopped. Ethan stepped out, his tailored suit catching the light, his stride confident as ever. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman, tall and elegant, her blonde hair cascading over an expensive coat that screamed wealth. Her hand was entwined with his, and on her finger, a diamond ring caught the sunlight, its facets throwing tiny rainbows across the pavement. The sight hit Zuri like a physical blow, stealing her breath. The ring wasn't just any ring. It was the kind of ring women dreamed of, the kind that promised forever, the kind she'd let herself imagine just moments ago. Ethan leaned down, his lips brushing the woman's forehead in a gesture so tender, so intimate, that Zuri felt her heart crack. The woman, Isabella, though Zuri didn't know her name yet, beamed up at him, her eyes sparkling as she glanced at the ring, then back at him. They were a picture of love, of a future Zuri had thought was hers. The light from the ring seemed to pulse, mocking her, each glint a reminder of her naivety. She sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap, her mind racing to make sense of the impossible. This couldn't be happening. There had to be an explanation. A sister, a cousin, a friend, anything but what her gut was screaming. Her eyes followed them as they walked closer, their voices carrying faintly through the cracked window. "I can't believe you finally did it," the woman said, her voice high with excitement. "I've been waiting for this moment." Ethan's laugh was soft, familiar, the same laugh he'd shared with Zuri over late-night dinners. "I'm sorry it took so long, darling," he replied, his tone warm, loving. "I wanted it to be perfect for you." Each word was a dagger, slicing through the illusion Zuri had built. Darling, perfect. The words he'd used with her were now offered to someone else. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow, as the truth settled like a stone in her stomach. She wasn't his darling. She wasn't his anything. Zuri's vision blurred, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. She gripped the edge of the seat, her nails digging into the leather, anchoring herself against the tidal wave of pain. The man she'd loved, the man who'd made her feel seen, cherished, had been living a lie. She was no longer the secretary dreaming of a fairy tale. She was a fool, a secret kept in the shadows of his real life. The realization was a visceral ache, as if her heart were being carved out, piece by piece. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shatter the perfect moment unfolding before her. But her body betrayed her, holding her still, a statue of shock and betrayal. Ethan and the woman paused near a white Mercedes parked a few spaces away. He opened the door for her, his hand lingering on hers, and Zuri's world tilted further. The woman slid into the car, her ring catching the light one last time before she disappeared inside. Ethan turned, his eyes briefly meeting Zuri's through the Bentley's window. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw guilt flicker across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He walked back to the Bentley, his steps measured, his expression unreadable. Zuri's heart pounded, a deafening drum in her ears. She wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, but the ring, the kiss, the truth, they were undeniable. As Ethan approached the car, Zuri's voiceover filled the silence, raw and trembling. "In that moment, I didn't just lose the love I thought I had. I lost the version of myself who believed in it. I wasn't his future. I was his secret, hidden in plain sight, and the weight of that truth crushed me. The car door opened, and Ethan slid into the driver's seat, his cologne filling the space once more. But it no longer felt like home. It was a reminder of everything she'd been blind to, everything she'd let herself ignore. The chapter closed with her staring out the window, the city blurring past, her heart a battlefield of hope and devastation, poised on the edge of a reckoning she wasn't yet ready to face. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a constellation of ambition, its towering spires piercing the twilight sky. 6 months before the devastating moment outside Tiffany & Co., Zuri Jackson stood amid a corporate gala, her clipboard clutched tightly, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of a seasoned secretary. At 25, Zuri, a black woman with a radiant smile and a mind sharper than the heels she wore, had crafted a life of deliberate simplicity. The daughter of a reclusive billionaire, she had traded penthouses for a modest Brooklyn apartment, choosing the grind of an ordinary job to taste a world untainted by her family's wealth. Tonight, she was in her element, orchestrating a high-stakes event for a tech conglomerate, ensuring every detail was flawless, champagne flutes sparkling, guest lists checked, and egos soothed. But beneath her poised exterior, a quiet hunger stirred, a longing for something real, something hers. The ballroom buzzed with the elite, men in tailored tuxedos, women draped in gowns that cost more than Zuri's monthly rent. She moved through the crowd, invisible yet indispensable, her dark curls pinned neatly, her navy dress understated but elegant. She was used to blending in, a skill honed from years of dodging her father's spotlight. But then, across the room, she felt a gaze settle on her, heavy and deliberate. Ethan Blackwood, the 30-year-old CEO of Blackwood Technologies, stood by a marble pillar, his presence magnetic. His dark hair was swept back, his green eyes sharp with intelligence. And his smile, God, that smile, carried a promise of secrets and possibilities. He was everything the magazine said, powerful, charming, untouchable, and he was looking at her. "You make this look effortless," he said, his voice low and warm as he approached. Zuri froze, her clipboard suddenly feeling like a shield. She managed a polite smile, brushing off the compliment. "Just doing my job, Mr. Blackwood." But he lingered, his gaze unwavering, as if he saw past her professional facade to the woman beneath. They talked first about the event, then about art, music, and the city's hidden corners. His wit matched hers, his laughter was a melody she hadn't known she craved. By the end of the night, he'd asked for her number, and she gave it without hesitation, her heart racing with a thrill she hadn't felt in years. The next 6 months unfolded like a dream spun from silk and starlight. Ethan pursued Zuri with an intensity that left her breathless. Their first date was at a Michelin-starred restaurant overlooking the Hudson, where the wine flowed like liquid gold, and the city lights danced in his eyes. He listened when she spoke, his attention a gift she hadn't realized she'd been starved for. "You're different," he told her, his hand brushing hers across the table. "You're real." Zuri, who had spent her life hiding her true identity, felt seen for the first time. She let herself believe he meant it, that a man like Ethan could want a woman like her, not the heiress, but the secretary who dreamed in quiet moments. Their romance became a tapestry of extravagance. Ethan whisked her away on a private yacht, the ocean stretching endlessly before them as they sipped champagne under a blanket of stars. He gifted her a silver watch, its delicate face engraved with a single word, forever. She wore it like a talisman, a reminder of the life she was building with him. Weekend getaways followed to the Hamptons, where they strolled barefoot on the beach, and to a chalet in Vermont, where they curled up by a fire, his arm around her as snow fell outside. Each moment was a brushstroke in a masterpiece she thought would last forever. She ignored the voice in her head that whispered caution, the one that sounded suspiciously like her best friend, Maya Torres. Maya, a freelance journalist with a knack for spotting lies, was the only person Zuri had told about her billionaire roots. They'd met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of independence. Maya was fierce, her brown eyes always searching for the truth, and she didn't trust Ethan. "He's too perfect," she said one evening at Zuri's apartment, her voice sharp as she swirled a glass of wine. Nobody's that flawless without something to hide. Zuri laughed it off, her heart too full to entertain doubt. He's just private, Maya. He wants to keep us special, away from the chaos of his world. Maya's raised eyebrow was her only reply, but the seed of unease was planted, though Zuri refused to water it. Ethan's world was a fortress, and Zuri was content to linger at its gates. He never invited her to his penthouse, always insisting her cozy apartment was more intimate. Your place feels like home, he'd say, sprawling on her thrift store couch, his polished shoes incongruous against the worn floorboards. She found it charming, a sign he valued her world over his own. He dodged questions about his family with practiced ease, redirecting with a joke or a kiss. Soon, darling, he'd murmur when she pressed to meet his friends. I'm not ready to share you yet. His words were honey, sweet and sticky, and she drank them in, ignoring the faint bitterness beneath. There were other signs, subtle but persistent, like cracks in a porcelain vase. His phone was always face down, its screen a mystery he guarded with casual deflections. Just business, he'd say when it buzzed, stepping away to answer in hushed tones. He never posted their photos online, despite Zuri's playful attempts to capture their moments. A selfie at a rooftop bar, a candid of him laughing over dessert. I'm not big on social media, he'd explain, his smile disarming. I like keeping us private. She convinced herself it was romantic, a shield against the world's prying eyes. But sometimes, late at night, she'd lie awake, the silence heavy with questions she didn't dare ask. One evening at a jazz club tucked away in the village, Zuri felt the weight of those questions more keenly. Ethan had canceled their plans twice that week, citing urgent meetings. When he finally showed up, he was distracted, his eyes flickering to his phone more than usual. Zuri, emboldened by a glass of bourbon, teased, "You're married to that phone, aren't you?" He laughed, but it was hollow, and he quickly changed the subject, pulling her onto the dance floor. As they swayed to the saxophone's mournful wail, she felt a pang of doubt, sharp and fleeting. She buried it, focusing on the warmth of his hand on her waist, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. Zuri's life as a secretary was her anchor, a deliberate choice to escape the gilded cage of her father's wealth. She loved the rhythm of her days, filing reports, scheduling meetings, earning her place through effort rather than privilege. But with Ethan, she allowed herself to dream bigger, to imagine a life where love and luxury could coexist. He showered her with gifts, a designer handbag, a pair of emerald earrings, each one a testament to his affection. Or so she thought. She didn't see the manipulation in his generosity, the way he used extravagance to keep her tethered. She was too caught up in the fairy tale, too enchanted by the man who made her feel like she was enough. Maya's warnings grew more insistent. Over coffee one morning, she leaned across the table, her voice urgent. Zuri, he's hiding something. Nobody lives like that, private to the point of secrecy, unless they've got a double life. Zuri bristled, defensive. You don't know him, Maya. He's just... Careful, he's got a lot at stake. Maya sighed, her eyes softening. I just don't want you to get hurt. Zuri nodded, but her heart was already Ethan's, blind to the shadows lurking behind his charm. As the gala's memory faded, Zuri stood in her apartment, staring at the silver watch on her wrist. Forever, it promised. She believed it, believed in him, because the alternative was too painful to consider. She was a woman who had chosen to live authentically, to carve her path, and Ethan seemed like the reward for that courage. The romance was a whirlwind, each moment more intoxicating than the last, and she let herself be swept away, unaware of the storm waiting to break. Her voiceover, soft and wistful, closed the chapter. I thought I was living a love story written in the stars, but some stories are built on lies, and I was too enchanted to see the truth. The hum of New York City faded into a dull roar as Zuri Jackson sat in the sleek black Bentley, the weight of her shattered illusions pressing against her chest. The Tiffany & Cover's storefront loomed across the street, its blue awning a mocking reminder of the moment her world had come crashing down. Ethan Blackwood had just stepped out with another woman, her finger adorned with a diamond ring that glinted like a cruel taunt. Zuri's breath caught, her hands trembling in her lap, as the memory of his tender kiss on that woman's forehead replayed in her mind. But as the shock settled, her thoughts spiraled backward, pulling her into the past 6 months, where the seeds of doubt had been sown, seeds she'd ignored, buried beneath the dazzle of Ethan's charm. Her voiceover, raw and introspective, broke the silence. I thought love was supposed to feel safe, but looking back, the signs were there, whispering truths I wasn't ready to hear. 6 months earlier, Zuri had been a different woman, hopeful, enchanted, a 25-year-old black secretary who had chosen a modest life over her billionaire father's empire. Her Brooklyn apartment, with its mismatched furniture and creaky floors, was her sanctuary, a deliberate rebellion against the gilded world she left behind. As a secretary for a high-end event planning firm, she thrived on the rhythm of her work, scheduling meetings, managing logistics, and earning her place through grit rather than privilege. But Ethan's arrival had shifted her orbit, pulling her into a world of opulence that both thrilled and unnerved her. Their romance, a heady mix of candlelit dinners and private getaways, had felt like a fairy tale. Yet beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form, subtle but persistent, like ripples in a still pond. The first sign came early, cloaked in Ethan's effortless charm. Zuri had suggested visiting his penthouse one evening, eager to see the space where the CEO of Blackwood Technologies lived. Your place is so much cozier, he'd said, lounging on her thrift store couch, his polished shoes at odds with the worn rug. It's intimate. I feel at home here. His smile was disarming, his words laced with warmth, and Zuri had melted, flattered by the idea that her modest apartment could outshine his luxurious world. But the excuse lingered, a faint echo of unease. Why did he never invite her to his home? She pushed the thought away, convincing herself it was a quirk, a sign of his affection for her simple life. Then there was his phone, always face down, a silent sentinel between them. Whether they were at a rooftop bar or curled up in her apartment, the device was a constant presence, its screen a mystery. If it buzzed, Ethan would glance at it, his expression tightening for a split second before he dismissed it with a casual, "Just business." Once, during a late-night dinner at a jazz club in the village, the phone had vibrated insistently, breaking the spell of their conversation. Zuri, emboldened by a glass of wine, had teased, "Is your phone your other girlfriend?" Ethan's laugh was quick, but his eyes didn't meet hers as he slipped the device into his pocket. "You're the only one I'm thinking about," he'd said, pulling her onto the dance floor. The music drowned her doubts, but they lingered, like a melody she couldn't unhear. Social media was another shadow. Zuri loved capturing their moments, a selfie by the Hudson, a candid of Ethan laughing over dessert, but he always deflected when she suggested posting them. "I'm a private guy," he'd say, his hand brushing hers, his voice soft but firm. "I like keeping us just for us." At first she found it romantic, a shield against the world's chaos. But as the weeks passed, the absence of their relationship in his digital life began to gnaw at her. She'd scroll through his sparse Instagram, filled with corporate events and solo shots, searching for a trace of herself. There was none. She told herself it was admirable, a sign of his maturity, but a quiet voice, one that sounded like her best friend Maya Torres, whispered otherwise. Maya, a freelance journalist with a nose for deception, had been Zuri's anchor since college. She was the only one who knew Zuri's true identity as the daughter of a billionaire, a secret Zuri guarded fiercely to maintain her independence. Over coffee at a cramped Brooklyn cafe, Maya had been blunt. "He's hiding something, Zuri. Nobody's that private unless they've got a secret." Zuri had bristled, her loyalty to Ethan flaring. "He's just cautious, Maya. He's got a company to run, a reputation to protect." Maya's eyes narrowed, her voice soft but pointed. "Protecting a reputation doesn't mean keeping you a ghost." Zuri had changed the subject, unwilling to let Maya's skepticism tarnish the glow of her romance. But the words stuck, a splinter in her heart. Back in the Bentley, the memory of those conversations hit Zuri like a wave. She stared at the Tiffany & Co. storefront, the blue awning now a symbol of betrayal. Her mind flashed to another moment, one she'd dismissed at the time but now saw in stark clarity. It was a rainy evening, 3 months into their relationship, when Ethan left his phone on her kitchen counter while he showered. The screen lit up with a notification, a name flashing briefly, Chloe Dubois. The message was partial, cut off by the lock screen, but Zuri caught the words. The money you promised. Her stomach had twisted, a primal instinct flaring, but when Ethan returned, his hair damp and his smile radiant, she'd let it go. Who's Chloe? She'd asked, keeping her tone light. Just a business contact, he'd said, his hand cupping her cheek. Nothing to worry about. She'd believed him, or wanted to, because the alternative was too heavy to bear. Ethan's cancellations were another red flag, growing more frequent as their relationship deepened. He'd bow out of plans at the last minute, citing urgent meetings or client emergencies. Once he'd stood her up at a gallery opening she'd planned for weeks, leaving her in a black dress, waiting alone under a neon sign. His apology came hours later, a bouquet of roses delivered to her apartment with a note. Forgive me, darling. Work got crazy. The flowers were beautiful, but they couldn't erase the sting of standing alone. Her phone silent as the night wore on. She'd forgiven him, of course, because his apologies were always grand, his affection a tidal wave that swept her doubts away. Sitting in the car now, Zuri's fingers tightened around the silver watch on her wrist, the one Ethan had given her with the word forever engraved on its face. The irony burned. Her voiceover cut through the silence, heavy with regret. I thought his secrecy was love, a way of keeping our world sacred, but it was a cage and I was too enchanted to see the bars. She replayed the moments when she'd questioned him, gently, always gently, about his life, his family, his friends, the parts of him she couldn't touch. Soon, he'd say, his lips brushing her forehead, a gesture she now knew he'd given to another. I just want to keep you to myself a little longer. She'd believed it, because the alternative meant admitting she was a fool. The most glaring sign was his absence from her world. In 6 months, she'd never met a single person from his life. No colleagues, no friends, no family. Her own life was an open book. Her co-workers knew about Ethan. Maya had met him briefly, and her mother had heard his name over late-night calls. But Ethan's world was a locked door, and she'd convinced herself it was romantic, a sign of his devotion. Now in the Bentley, the truth was inescapable. He hadn't kept her private to protect her. He'd kept her hidden to protect himself. Zuri's heart pounded as she stared at the empty street, the Tiffany & Co. doors still and silent. Her mind churned, piecing together the fragments of doubt she'd ignored. The phone, the cancellations, the secrecy. It wasn't love. It was control. She thought of Maya's warnings, each one a lifeline she'd refused to grasp. You deserve someone who shouts your name from the rooftops, Maya had said, her voice fierce, not someone who keeps you in the shadows. Zuri had laughed, but now the shadows felt suffocating. Her voiceover returned, softer now, laced with a dawning realization. I wanted so badly to be chosen, to be enough, that I let myself be blind. But the signs were there, screaming at me to wake up. In the car, Zuri's eyes burned with unshed tears, her fingers tracing the watch's engraving. Forever had been a lie, but the truth was sharper, clearer. She wasn't just a secretary in love. She was a woman on the verge of discovering her strength, though she didn't know it yet. The chapter closed with her staring out the window, the city's lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of pain and possibility, the first threads of resolve weaving through her broken heart. The air inside the Bentley was thick with betrayal, the scent of Ethan Blackwood's sandalwood cologne, now a bitter reminder of Zuri Jackson's shattered dreams. Outside, the Tiffany & Co. storefront stood like a monument to her naivety, its blue awning casting a shadow over the sleek car where she sat, frozen. Moments ago, she'd watched Ethan emerge with a woman named Isabella, her finger adorned with a diamond ring that sparkled with cruel clarity. His tender kiss on Isabella's forehead had been a blade through Zuri's heart, slicing away the illusion of their 6-month romance. At 25, Zuri, a black woman who had traded her billionaire heiress roots for a humble life as a secretary, had believed she was Ethan's everything. Now as he approached the car, his stride confident but his eyes guarded, She braced herself for the truth she wasn't sure she could bear. Her voiceover, raw and trembling, filled the silence. I thought love was my anchor, but in that moment, I realized it was a chain, and I was about to learn how heavy it could be. Ethan slid into the driver's seat, his presence filling the car like a storm cloud. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a cocoon of tension. Zuri's hands gripped the edge of her seat, her nails digging into the leather as she fought to steady her breath. Her mind churned, replaying the scene outside Tiffany's. The ring, the kiss, the woman who wasn't her. Her heart screamed for answers, but her body felt leaden, as if the weight of his betrayal had anchored her to the seat. She stared straight ahead, the city's lights blurring through the windshield, afraid that meeting his gaze would unravel her completely. Ethan's silence was deafening, his hands resting casually on the steering wheel, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The man she'd loved, the CEO who'd swept her into a world of luxury, was a stranger now, and she needed to know why. Who was that? Zuri's voice was barely above a whisper, fragile but sharp, cutting through the suffocating quiet. She turned to him, her dark eyes searching his face for a shred of the man she thought she knew. Ethan's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the dashboard. For a moment she thought he might lie, spin another charming excuse as he had so many times before. But then he sighed, a sound heavy with resignation, and met her eyes. That's Isabella, he said, his tone flat, almost indifferent. She's my fiancée. The word hit Zuri like a slap, sharp and stinging, stealing the air from her lungs. Fiancé. The truth was a physical ache, a fist closing around her heart. Fiancé? She repeated, her voice cracking. How long? Ethan looked away, his fingers drumming lightly on the wheel. 2 years, he said quietly. The engagement's been planned for months. 2 years. The words echoed in Zuri's mind, each one a hammer striking the fragile foundation of their romance. While she'd been falling for him, dreaming of a future together, he'd been building a life with someone else. Every dinner, every gift, every whispered promise, it had all been a lie. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet, not in front of him. She thought of the silver watch on her wrist, the one he'd given her with forever engraved on its face. She thought of the investment she'd made in his supposed startup project, a significant sum from her savings, handed over in a moment of trust. The memory turned her stomach. You took my money, she said, her voice steadier now, edged with accusation. You said it was for a project? Was that a lie too? Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something colder, more calculated. Come on, Zuri, he said, his tone patronizing, as if she were a child asking foolish questions. You're a smart woman. Did you think someone like me would end up with someone like you? You were fun, a distraction. And that body of yours. He paused, his eyes raking over her, with a hunger that made her skin crawl. Let's just say it kept me interested. Why don't we keep things as they are? Be my little secret, darling. I can make it worth your while. A nice apartment, maybe a car. You'd like that, wouldn't you? His words were a venomous mix of arrogance and entitlement, each one a deliberate attempt to diminish her, to reduce her to a transaction. Zuri's blood roared in her ears, her vision narrowing to a pinpoint. The man she'd loved, who'd made her feel cherished, was now stripping her bare, not just of her dignity, but of her worth. Someone like me? She echoed, her voice shaking with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan shrugged, his casual cruelty cutting deeper than any blade. You're a secretary, Zuri, a nobody playing at something bigger. I gave you a taste of my world, and you should be grateful for it. The words were a calculated blow, designed to make her feel small, unworthy, as if her love, her trust, her very existence were insignificant. Her hands clenched into fists, the silver watch digging into her skin, a painful reminder of the lies she'd swallowed. The car felt like a cage, its luxurious interior now a prison of humiliation. Zuri's mind raced, fragments of their 6 months together, flashing like a broken reel. The dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, the weekend getaways, the moments she'd felt like the center of his universe. all tainted now, stained by the truth. She'd been his secret, his side piece, while Isabella wore his ring and his future, and the money she'd given him thousands, believing it was for a shared dream, only to learn it was another piece of his deception. Her voiceover broke through, raw and searing. He didn't just break my heart, he tried to break my spirit, to make me believe I was less than I am. But even in that moment, something inside me refused to crumble. "Take me home," Zuri said, her voice low but firm, a command rather than a request. Ethan hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if weighing whether to push further. But he said nothing, starting the engine with a soft purr. The drive to her Brooklyn apartment was a study in silence, the city's lights streaking past like tears she wouldn't shed. Zuri stared out the window, her mind a battlefield of pain and rage. She thought of her best friend, Maya Torres, who had warned her about Ethan's secrecy, her words now ringing with painful clarity. She thought of her own choice to live as a secretary, to hide her billionaire heritage, all to find something authentic. And yet, here she was, betrayed by the man she thought was her truth. The watch on her wrist felt heavy, its forever inscription a mocking lie. She gripped it tightly, her fingers tracing the engraving, as if she could crush the pain it represented. Ethan's offer echoed in her mind. Be his little secret, live in the shadows for scraps of his affection and wealth. The temptation was there, a flicker of weakness born from months of luxury she'd let herself crave. A nicer apartment, a car, a life of ease. It was what her father's world had always offered, and what she'd rejected to prove her worth. But to accept Ethan's deal would mean surrendering her soul, trading her dignity for a gilded cage. She rejected it, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. As the Bentley pulled up to her apartment building, its modest facade a stark contrast to the opulence of Ethan's world, Zuri found her voice again. "Why me?" she asked, her eyes locked on his. "Why did you do this to me?" Ethan's gaze was cold, his earlier charm replaced by a dismissive smirk. "Because you made it easy," he said. "You wanted to believe in the fairy tale, and I gave it to you." The words were a final blow, a deliberate attempt to shatter her spirit. But instead of breaking, something inside Zuri sparked, a fire, small but fierce, that refused to let him have the last word. She opened the car door, stepping out into the cool night air, her heart pounding but her head high. The Bentley drove away, its taillights fading into the city's pulse, leaving her alone on the sidewalk. Her voiceover closed the chapter, steady despite the pain. "He thought he could define my worth, that his lies could make me small. But in that moment, I felt the first stirrings of something stronger. Anger, yes, but also the promise of a reckoning." The night swallowed her figure, but the fire within her burned brighter, a beacon of resilience waiting to ignite. The dim glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across Zuri Jackson's Brooklyn apartment, its modest walls a stark contrast to the opulence she'd once let herself crave. The silver watch Ethan Blackwood had given her lay discarded on the coffee table, its forever engraving a bitter reminder of his betrayal. At 25, Zuri, a black woman who had traded her billionaire heiress roots for a secretary's life, sat on her worn couch, her laptop open, her eyes burning with a fire born of humiliation and resolve. The memory of Ethan's cruel words outside Tiffany & Co. "Did you think someone like me would end up with someone like you?" still stung, as did the revelation that he'd swindled her savings for a fake project. But the pain was no longer a weight, it was fuel. Zuri's voiceover, steady and fierce, cut through the silence. "He thought he could break me, hide me, use me, but I was done being his secret. It was time to uncover his." The city outside her window thrummed with life, but inside Zuri was a storm of purpose. Her best friend, Maya Torres, sat across from her, her journalist's instincts alight as they sifted through a digital trail of Ethan's deceit. Maya's brown eyes gleamed with determination, her laptop screen reflecting a mosaic of social media profiles, text messages, and bank records. "This guy's a predator," Maya said, her voice low but sharp. "And you're not his only victim." Zuri's heart clenched at the words, but they also sparked a grim satisfaction. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just personal, It was a pattern, one she was determined to unravel. She thought of the name she'd seen on his phone months ago, Chloe Dubois. The partial message, the money you promised, had haunted her, a clue she'd ignored in her lovesick haze. Now it was her starting point. Zuri's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching for Chloe. It didn't take long to find her, a striking woman in her 30s, a venture capitalist with a polished LinkedIn profile and a trail of glamorous Instagram posts. But beneath the curated perfection, Zuri noticed gaps. Cryptic captions about trust, photos with Ethan at events, quickly deleted. She sent Chloe a message, her words careful but direct. I know Ethan Blackwood. I think he's hurt you too. Can we talk? The wait for a reply was agonizing, each passing minute a test of Zuri's nerve. When her phone buzzed, Chloe's response was brief. Meet me tomorrow. Coffee shop on Bleecker, 10 a.m. Zuri exhaled, a mix of relief and dread settling in her chest. This was real now, no turning back. The next morning, the coffee shop was a haven of clinking cups and murmured conversations. Chloe Dubois sat in a corner booth, her auburn hair pulled back, her eyes wary but curious. Zuri approached, her heart pounding, and slid into the seat across from her. You're the one from his phone, Chloe said, her voice clipped but not unkind. Zuri nodded, her throat tight. He took my money, she said, and my trust. Chloe's expression softened, a flicker of shared pain crossing her face. He took $2 million from me, she admitted, her voice low. Said it was for a tech startup. I believed him because... She trailed off, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Because he made me feel special. Zuri recognized the ache in her words, the same one she'd carried. Chloe agreed to help, her anger matching Zuri's, a bond forming in their shared betrayal. Back at her apartment, Zuri and Maya dug deeper, their investigation fueled by Chloe's revelations. They found Sophia Nguyen, a young entrepreneur whose startup had collapsed after Ethan invested her funds in a non-existent venture. Sophia's social media was a graveyard of ambition, posts about her dreams, then silence after Ethan's name appeared in her mentions. Zuri reached out, and Sophia's response was immediate, her voice trembling over the phone. He promised me the world, then left me with nothing. Each story was a thread in a tapestry of deception, Ethan's charm a weapon he wielded against women with wealth or dreams. Zuri's loss, a significant chunk of her savings, paled in comparison, but it burned just as fiercely. She wasn't just a victim, she was part of a sisterhood of the betrayed. The most shocking discovery came when Zuri contacted Isabella Moretti, Ethan's fiancée. She sent a message with screenshots, texts from Ethan, photos of their dates, and bank transfers for his project. Isabella's reply was a single sentence. Meet me at my office, now. Zuri arrived at a sleek Manhattan high-rise, her nerves taut as she faced Isabella, a 38-year-old heiress with a commanding presence. But beneath her polished exterior, Isabella's eyes were red-rimmed, her voice unsteady. I suspected something, she admitted, clutching Zuri's screenshots. He was distant, always on his phone. But I didn't want to believe it. Zuri saw herself in Isabella's pain, the denial they'd both clung to. He's not who you think, Zuri said softly, but we can stop him. Isabella nodded, her jaw tightening. I'm in. The four women, Zuri, Maya, Chloe, and Isabella, met in Zuri's apartment, a war council forged in shared fury. Maya, ever the journalist, laid out their evidence. Text messages, bank records, deleted social media posts linking Ethan to at least 6 other women, all wealthy, all manipulated. He's a con artist, Maya said, her voice steely. He uses charm to get close, then takes what he can. Zuri's mind flashed to Ethan's offer in the Bentley, to be his little secret for a price. The memory fueled her resolve, but it also sparked a deeper conflict. To expose Ethan, she'd need to reveal her secret, her identity as a billionaire's daughter. It was a truth she'd buried to live authentically, to escape her father's shadow. Using it now felt like a betrayal of her principles, a return to a world she'd rejected. Zuri paced her apartment, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Her voiceover captured her turmoil. I wanted to fight for justice, but it meant stepping back into a world I'd run from. Was I seeking truth or just revenge? Maya, sensing her hesitation, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not your father's money," she said. "You're Zuri, and you're enough." The words steadied her, reminding her why she'd chosen this path. To be real, to be true. She decided to use her family's influence, not for power, but to amplify the voices of Ethan's victims. The plan took shape. A gala at her family's Manhattan estate, a stage to expose Ethan before the city's elite. It would be a reckoning, and Zuri would be its architect. Planning the gala consumed them. Zuri, with her event planning expertise, orchestrated every detail. Invitations to key figures in Ethan's world, a guest list including Chloe, Sophia, and Isabella. Maya hacked into Ethan's email, uncovering a trail of lies that would seal his fate. Chloe and Isabella used their connections to ensure the event would draw media attention, turning it into a public unmasking. Zuri's heart raced as she finalized the guest list, Ethan's name at its center. She imagined his face when he realized the trap, the moment his charm would crumble. But doubt lingered. What if he turned the tables? What if revealing her identity cost her the life she'd built? She pushed the fears aside, focusing on the women beside her, their strength a mirror to her own. The night before the gala, Zuri stood alone in her apartment, staring at a list of Ethan's victims scrawled on a notepad. Each name was a story, a life he'd tried to break. Her voiceover returned, resolute. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman he'd used, every dream he'd stolen. I was ready to light the match. She slipped the silver watch Ethan had given her into a drawer, closing it with a decisive click. The gala loomed, a battlefield where truth would clash with deception. Zuri didn't know what the night would bring, but she knew one thing. She was no longer the woman who'd waited in the Bentley, blind to the signs. She was a force, and Ethan Blackwood was about to learn what that meant. The Manhattan night shimmered with opulence as the Jackson family's estate glowed under a canopy of stars. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the grand ballroom, where New York's elite mingled, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne flutes. Zuri Jackson stood at the edge of the room, her heart a drumbeat of resolve and nerves. At 25, the black woman who had traded her billionaire heiress roots for a secretary's life now wore a sleek emerald gown, her dark curls cascading over her shoulders. Tonight, she was no longer the hidden lover or the naive dreamer who had waited in Ethan Blackwood's Bentley outside Tiffany & Co. She was a force poised to unravel the man who had betrayed her and so many others. Her voiceover, steady and fierce, set the stage. This wasn't just a gala. It was a reckoning, and I was ready to burn his world to the ground. The ballroom was a masterpiece of Zuri's design, every detail meticulously planned to draw Ethan into her trap. The guest list was a who's of the city's power players, tech moguls, media tycoons, and investors, all invited under the guise of a charity fundraiser. But the true purpose lay in the women seated strategically around the room. Isabella Moretti, Ethan's fiancée, her face a mask of poised fury. Chloe Dubois, the venture capitalist whose millions Ethan had swindled, and Sophia Nguyen, the young entrepreneur whose dreams he'd shattered. Maya Torres, Zuri's best friend and a journalist with a nose for truth, stood by her side, her eyes scanning the crowd for Ethan's arrival. The air crackled with anticipation, the weight of their shared mission binding them like steel. Ethan entered, his tailored suit accentuating his commanding presence, his smile as disarming as ever. He moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands, charming investors, oblivious to the storm brewing. Zuri watched him, her pulse quickening. The memory of his words in the Bentley, "Did you think someone like me would end up with someone like you?" ignited a fire in her chest. He'd humiliated her, taken her money, and offered to make her his little secret. But tonight she would turn his game against him. Her voiceover, laced with defiance, echoed, "He thought he could keep us all in the shadows, but shadows can't exist when you light them up." Zuri took the stage, a spotlight bathing her in a warm glow. The crowd hushed, their attention hers. She gripped the microphone, her hands steady despite the storm within. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "Most of you know me as a secretary, someone who blends into the background. But tonight, I'm here to tell you who I am." A murmur rippled through the room as Zuri revealed her truth. I am Zuri Jackson, daughter of Malcolm Jackson, one of the wealthiest men in America. Gasps followed, eyes widening as the crowd processed her identity. Ethan's smile faltered, his gaze locking onto hers, a flicker of panic betraying his composure. Zuri's heart raced, but she pressed on, her voice unwavering. I chose to live simply, to find my path. But one man thought he could exploit that choice, exploit me and exploit others. She gestured to a screen behind her, where Maya had prepared a damning presentation. Images flashed, text messages from Ethan to Zuri, Chloe, and Sophia, each promising love and futures that never materialized. Bank records showing millions funneled into fake ventures, deleted social media posts linking him to a half-dozen other women. The crowd's murmurs grew into a low roar, shock turning to outrage. Zuri's voice rose, cutting through the noise. Ethan Blackwood is not the man he claims to be. He's a liar, a manipulator, a thief who preys on women's trust and dreams. She locked eyes with him, her gaze ablade. And tonight, we're taking our power back. Isabella stood first, her heels clicking as she approached the stage. You told me I was your forever, she said, her voice trembling with controlled rage. But you were planning our wedding while you were with her. She pointed at Zuri, then turned to the crowd. And her. Chloe rose next, her voice steady but sharp. You took $2 million from me, Ethan. You said it was for a startup. It was for your lies. Sophia followed, her youthful face hardened by betrayal. You promised to fund my dreams, then left me with nothing but debt. The room erupted, gasps and whispers crescendoing into chaos. Ethan's face paled, his charm crumbling, as the women's voices merged into a chorus of truth. Ethan tried to salvage his image, stepping forward with a forced laugh. This is absurd, he said, his voice smooth but strained. These women are mistaken, confused. I'm a businessman, not a monster. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Zuri held up a hand, silencing him. You don't get to talk your way out of this, she said. Not anymore. She revealed the final blow. I've sent this evidence to the press and the authorities. They're waiting for you outside. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Ethan's eyes darted to the exits, his composure shattered. The crowd parted as security approached, their presence a silent promise of justice. The chaos reached its peak as Isabella, Chloe, and Sophia closed in on Ethan, their voices a storm of accusations. Isabella slapped him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Chloe's words were venom. You'll pay back every cent. Sophia, tears streaming, spat, You're nothing. The crowd watched, transfixed, as Ethan's empire crumbled. His company's stock would plummet by morning. His family's reputation, already fragile, would collapse under the weight of scandal. Zuri stood tall, her heart pounding, but her spirit unbroken. Her voiceover captured the moment. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about showing the world who he was and who we could be. As Ethan was escorted out, his head bowed, Zuri stepped off the stage, her emerald gown catching the light. The crowd buzzed, some applauding, others whispering, but she felt a strange calm. She'd done it, not just for herself, but for every woman he'd hurt. Maya hugged her tightly, whispering, You were incredible. Isabella, Chloe, and Sophia joined them, their faces a mix of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Isabella said, her voice soft. You gave us our voices back. Zuri nodded, her throat tight. The bond between them was unspoken but unbreakable, a sisterhood forged in fire. Weeks later, Zuri stood on a bridge overlooking the Hudson, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop. In her hand was the silver watch Ethan had given her, its forever engraving now a relic of her past. She held it over the water, her fingers trembling, then let it go. It sank into the dark depths, a symbol of the lies she'd left behind. Her voiceover, serene but powerful, filled the air. I didn't need his ring, his promises, or his world to know my worth. I was enough, and that was the greatest truth of all. The camera lingered on the rippling water, the city's lights reflecting like stars, a testament to her freedom. The scene shifted to a charity event, where Zuri stood on a stage, no longer hiding her identity. She spoke to a rapt audience, her story of betrayal and triumph inspiring others. "You are not someone's secret," she said, her voice resonant. "You are not defined by those who can't see you. You are enough exactly as you are." The crowd erupted in applause, her words a beacon for anyone who'd ever felt unseen. She glanced at Maya, Chloe, Isabella, and Sophia in the audience, their smiles a reminder of their shared victory. The chapter closed with Zuri stepping off the stage, her heart light but fierce. Her voiceover delivered a final call to action. Have you ever stood up for your truth? Drop a comment and share your story, and subscribe to see where this journey takes us next. The screen faded to black, the echo of her words lingering, a challenge to the audience to claim their power. Zuri's path was her own now, unburdened by Ethan's lies, her billionaire roots no longer a shadow, but a tool for change. The gala had been her battlefield, and she'd emerged not just a survivor, but a warrior. Thank you for joining Zuri's journey through betrayal, resilience, and triumph in the ring that never was. Her story reminds us that our worth isn't defined by those who try to dim our light, but by the strength we find within. We hope Zuri's courage inspires you to reflect on your moments of standing up for truth. Have you ever faced a betrayal that pushed you to reclaim your power? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what this story means to you. Your voice matters, just like Zuri's. Thank you for being part of this journey, for feeling every heartbreak and victory with us. Hit that subscribe button to catch our next story, where we'll dive into more tales of strength and transformation. Until then, keep shining. You are enough. See you soon.